I wanted a place for people to receive authentic guidance and practical ways to awaken. Thought-provoking, paradigm-shifting, and empowering. This is about expanding our human consciousness to create a wave of new possibilities. I'm Dr. Theresa Bullard-Wyke, and this is Quantum Minds TV. Welcome to Quantum Minds TV, where we take a deep dive into various perspectives on what it's going to take to create a shift in human consciousness. On today's show, I'm very excited to have joining me Drs. JJ and Desiree Hurtak. The Hurtaks are social scientists, futurists, and the founders of the Academy for Future Science, an international NGO organization that bridges in the cooperation between science and spirituality through the positive use of consciousness. Dr. J.J. Hurtak has 2 PhDs, not just one from the University of California and the second from the University of Minnesota. And he's authored several books, including The End of Suffering in collaboration with Russell Targ, and his bestseller, The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch. Now, Drs. J.J. and Desiree Hurtak have also co-authored numerous books together, including Mind Dynamics in Space and Time, in collaboration with physicist Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher. And they are the co-authors of several peer-reviewed articles examining how quantum physics works with the powers of the mind. Their most recent publications include Our Moment of Choice from 2020, which also contains their insights on how consciousness works, along with many contributions from 40 other international respected writers, such as Deepak Chopra and Bruce Lipton. So welcome to Quantum Minds TV, and thank you so much for being my distinguished guest today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, we're very honored to be with you, and thank you for the overview. We're very excited about the new evidences of life in the universe and our role that we play as consciousness beings.
Right. There's so much happening with the James Webb telescope coming out, and people are starting to look not only to the stars, but to science to see what's really taking place in the cosmos.
We're at the cusp of breaking the records of iniquity, looking forwards and backwards at the same time to give us a holistic model of the human race.
Well, you both have been in this field for a very long time with, trying to bridge science and spirituality, helping to awaken human consciousness. And, you have like 50 years or so in a lifelong career dedicated to this mission of helping humanity to awaken and to do so in a way that really is of the light. So I just want to honor and acknowledge the fact that you have so much wisdom and experience to bring to the plate. And so what have you found as some of the most important keys when it comes to this process of awakening human consciousness?
Well, there's many levels, but I know we want to start with the science first. And we're one of the first to talk about, especially Dr. Hurtak, is that if we go back 50 years, about a multiverse, that we are part of many universes. And I know one of the things, Dr. Theresa, you share with us is the fact of David Bohm, who had this understanding that everything is interconnected. And so it's so important to start realizing the power of who we are in all of this, that we are part of a much greater reality. We are all interconnected, and not only our universe, but the multi-universes. And I think that's so cool with what's going on with the James Webb is, we're looking back in time. We're going back perhaps in what we're seeing 400 million years from the start of what's called the Big Bang, even though we feel, that's really just a singularity, but not alone, that there was other universes before that and other universes that will come after that. And so this is what's so amazing, that it wasn't just chaos coming out at the beginning. That's exactly what Bohm was talking about. It was really something that was, we'll say, had order to it, had design to it. And whether you call it a divine design or just something from another universe, there's some sort of energy that made what we have today.
As a matter of fact, we know that there's simply 4% of known matter of the universe that we understand. The rest is dark energy, dark matter. These are terms yet to be fully understood, but there's so little that we do understand. And now with new scientific tools such as the Webb laboratory in space, we can take a clear look at the very beginnings within the microseconds of life.
And although we'll talk a little bit more about this, I want to throw in at the very beginning, we believe consciousness is behind everything. And so it's not just science. I don't want to turn off some of your listeners thinking it's all just molecules and atoms, somewhere how designed. There's consciousness behind it.
Our position is that mind and matter both come out of consciousness.
Yeah. So you've just already brought up so much there. And I want to just take a little bit of a step back for a moment, because not everyone necessarily knows who David Bohm is. Now, David Bohm was a theoretical physicist, and in the early 1980s, he helped to really, I would say, come at approaching this quantum physics and how to quantum physics and gravity, what's going to be needed to unite the two, because this is what science still today is like. This is the big missing link, is how do we unite quantum physics and gravity at that quantum scale to create a unified field theory. But I would say that David Bohm really took a whole new approach. Like, he was really trying to get outside the box and look at it from a completely different perspective. And he said ultimately that whatever theory we come up with, it needs to be more holistic. It needs to include everything. And he introduced this idea of what he called the implicate order versus the explicate order. And the explicate order being what you see is what you get, the things that we can measure, the way in which we tend to experience and perceive our three-dimensional reality. And so that was the tangible, the experiential, whereas the implicate order was something much deeper, some higher dimensional reality that this experiential 3D reality was just a projection of. And so he called that higher reality, or that more multidimensional, whether it's multiversal or higher dimensions, and we can talk about that as well, is the greater reality, and that our experience here is almost like a holographic projection, not in a literal sense, but in a metaphorical sense, a holographic projection of a much higher reality. And when you mention consciousness, I would say that really comes and ties into a lot of the Hermetic teachings and many ancient wisdom teachings that says the all is mind, and that the universe is, and universes upon universes upon universes are like creations within the mind of the all. And even our consciousness here is like a projection from some greater us, some higher spiritual being that we are, that is emanating into this physical experiential world. So I just wanted to kind of tie some of that in. And I would like to ask you, like, how do you feel that Bohm's implicate order and the hollow movement and how everything is more part of a greater whole, how do you feel that relates to us as humans?
Well, I think Bohm has reformulated a greater flow plan, going back to classical physics, even to what the ancient Greek philosophers called, in the Greek language, henkai pan, many in one. He was able to conceptualize how the different particles and elements of the universe work with a rhythm and a pattern of information that leads us into a holistic model. Bohm was able to, stand on the shoulders of Einstein and others of his early generation at UC Berkeley and other intellectual schools, and see beyond the limitations of classical physics.
Right. So he was trying to merge relativity, of course, with quantum physics. And he sided more, of course, with quantum physics. And you have the things like the wave particle dynamics, the physical, the part, and the wave particles. And you also have delayed choice. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. That was coming out about the same time as his. What's interesting is the fact that consciousness plays a major role in all of this. And that's not just me playing a role in the universe. It's all of us interconnected. He saw that information was the key behind everything. And of course, whether you look at a God consciousness or whether you look at just an evolved, we'll say, mind consciousness, there is something behind it. The Mayans actually even looked to the stars and they said, there's something out there they called Spider Woman, or Ixchacalnuch is what the Mayans actually called her, and that she designed every single star in the heavens to be where there she is or where they are. And that's part of this matrix of energy that is manifesting. It's an amazing scenario if you start thinking about it. We always thought, again, going back to that Big Bang, everything just kind of flew apart, and wherever it landed, that was great. And Bohm came in and said, absolutely no way. There's this implicate order. There's this energy behind things that is placing things in the right informational relationship.
If I can add to that, with the science today, with their cosmic microwave background radiation measurements, they're even showing that many of the densities, the pockets where the thing, where stars and galaxies and so forth have developed seem to follow almost like a holographic mathematics. And there is a structure to it that is not just random. It's not just chaotic. There's a structure to it. And it kind of reminds me of, and they say that background radiation is like a snapshot, if you will, of what the variations of the densities and the bending of space and time that became the pockets of where planets and stars and so forth coagulated inside of. It was there from the very beginning, which indicates just what you're talking about, that there was a pattern that was impressed upon the fabric of space-time itself, which then governed where everything ultimately formed. And it reminds me, from an alchemical perspective, it reminds me of almost like those places where space-time is bent, almost like a well or a valley. It becomes like this cauldron, an alchemical cosmic cauldron, where the particles and the light and everything kind of enters and accumulates inside of, which then allows it to form. And then later down the line, it becomes these stars, it becomes these, solar systems, these galaxies and so forth. And there is this cosmic web and this dance. And from a metaphysical perspective also, if we go to like the Kabbalistic teachings, they often talk about this pattern of the tree of life somehow being a pattern that governs the creation of the universe, that there was always a pattern, there was an intention and a flow in terms of how creation ushered forth, how the energies were emanated from that source, whether it was a Big Bang moment or whether it came out from a multiverse to create this new universe, that there is an intentionality behind it.
Let's take a pause from this fascinating conversation to enjoy a quick consciousness break.
Introduction to Kabbalah Chants, a healing meditation series for awakening the tree of life within. Each album in this 11-part series is specially tuned to musical frequencies, soundscape, and divine names that capture the essence of each sephira on the tree of life. The music of these healing meditations is tuned to a 432 Hz musical scale, which is a pure frequency fundamental to the sacred geometry and mathematics of the universe, also combined with binaural beat and isochronic brainwave entrainment. The word Kabbalah means to receive, so allow yourself to just receive during these meditations. It is said that the ears are the gateway to the inner world of the soul. As you listen to these sacred tones and healing music, we invite you to allow your soul to soar within the vast realms of your true divine potential.
Well, Bohm was able to take the Kabbalistic concept of the tree of life and turn it upside down to the roots of human consciousness, where we as humans realize that we are a microcosm of the greater macrocosm in the intricate weavings that Desiree just spoke about with the Mayans, basically, that had a network of fractal geometries. It's amazing that he was able to encompass the past as well as the present and realize the consciousness was the matrix of evolution.
Right. And I just want to qualify once again, the hologram or holographic scenario he put out is because he felt every part was part of every part. That's really the essence of the hologram. It's not the laser beam itself. It's that every part is part of every part. And so we do play a role. And I think this is so interesting because the more and more we talk about the fact that there's this intelligence behind there, that, all this is ordered, then what do we do here? Right. But we're part of that intelligence. I believe that we really do play a major role in events taking place. You go back, and I'm just going to drop down to earth for a minute, go back to some of the Maasai, and they say that, if some things aren't going right on their planet because of where they are, because of the climate or whatever, it's their problem. Even though I believe we're part of a greater universe, and our position in the, the Milky Way and the Milky Way's position in the larger universe is all playing a role, but everything plays a role. So I think that's so important to empower people to understand this. But, and there is this thing called delayed choice, where you look at the dichotomy between the particle and the wave. But, and this is an experiment that Wheeler had done, where he was putting a particle through, and sometimes it'll become a wave and sometimes it'll stay a particle. But if a person's looking at it, it'll always be a particle. And so you think, well, okay, what happens if it goes through before I think about it, before it even knows I'm going to look at it? But it seems to know, even in the future, that you're going to look at it and it becomes a particle. So this is just an amazing thing, how conscious the universe is. I don't think we can even imagine it because we're so limited to space and time and what's happening here, what happened in the past. We can't imagine the future, but we've worked in ways and in places like with remote viewing, connected with people like Russell Targ at Stanford Research and Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann and others that actually could see things into the future, just a little bit, not a lot, not, thousands of years or something like that, but, say 6 months, 9 months. So, why couldn't the particle also, which is part of us, also understand what we're going to do in the future, even before we know what we're going to do?
Right. Targ and Puthoff challenged the reductionistic paradigm of science, showing that there are things we don't understand. And one of the greatest breakthroughs in the 20th century, the latter part of which was the work at Stanford Research Institute, was to show that non-locality is a reality. We are growing up in a vast and awesome universe, and our perceptual apparatus in unique ways is interwoven with consciousness. This is work that scientist, physicist by the name of Dean Radin was able to put up when he wrote this book, The Entangled Mind. We are really rediscovering ourselves as part of a universal mind working on different frequencies.
So I think just, for people to process how profound this is, the delayed choice experiments really show that future decisions affect past results. And it's really, verifying that not only is entanglement, for example, which is a quantum phenomenon, not only is it non-local, meaning no matter how far apart in space two entangled particles become, they still instantaneously affect each other. But it's also non-temporal, meaning no matter how far apart in time they become, they still instantaneously affect each other. So the fact that our future decisions can potentially affect our past, and it's the key here is the choices that we make when we observe, the assumptions that we make when we set up our, for example, when scientists set up our experiment, they're making certain assumptions. Are we going to assume that it's a particle? Or are we going to assume that it's a wave? And then we set up to observe according to our assumptions. And then, we get what we expect, basically. We're getting according to our assumptions or our biases. So this, when we tie this back to consciousness, this is like really asking us to check your assumptions, right? Because assumptions can often create our reality, whether we're, it's the reality we really want or not. And, be careful about our biases and expectations. And then realize that, at a quantum level, time and space don't limit things. Everything is here and now. And so the choices we make now, the things we do now, and I like what you were saying, Desiree, it's Desiree, that our thoughts and what's going on inside of our mind affects our environment. And, when we look at the problems in the world today, we see the environment is challenged. There's climate change is a really good example of this, or the pollutions of the waters are a very good example of this. A lot of this is the impact of human behavior, and that is determined by human thought. So if we want to change our environment and we want to resolve or solve some of these issues that we're facing at a climate level or at any level of humanity, we need to start by changing things within our consciousness. So how would you add into that idea?
Well, certainly, yeah, everything we do affects everything around us. And I don't think we even realize that, negative thoughts and thinkings attract negative things to ourselves. It's an amazing phenomenon. Yes, we can be living in an environment that's not positive, but that doesn't mean we need to flow with the negativity. It means we need to change who we are and what we're doing. I want to go back, though, to science for 1 minute, because I know we'll be moving out of that topic. But, I just want to explain to some of your audience about non-locality, because it also relates to what we're talking about. So what scientists have done is they've taken particles and they've divided them. So either whether it's photons or electrons, and then they've moved those particles at a distance. And they've done this in Switzerland, and the Chinese have now done it to satellites. And, one part of the spin is always going to be up and the other part of the particle would always be down. And so when they've changed the direction of the particle on Earth, say, for example, with the Chinese in a satellite, the other one, faster than the speed of light, actually shifts to the other direction. So it knows what that other part of its particle was doing. So that's what we call entanglement and non-locality. Those are the two realities that we've been able to prove. So what does that mean to us? Well, that means that we ourselves are able to affect everything around us very quickly, faster even than the speed of light, by putting thought forms out. We did this years ago. We worked with another, we'll say, scientist, paraphysicist named Andrea Bollard, and we would do actual prayers for peace in different parts of the world. We still do that because we feel that really putting our energies there, literally being there, can make a difference. We've seen this. How did Ingo or Helen Hammond at SRI do remote viewing? They actually remote viewed into the Kremlin, for example. Helen did that, and she walked around the Kremlin. It wasn't that she actually even moved her mind there. She saw herself there. She was literally physically there, because just because we have a body doesn't mean our consciousness cannot be like that other particle somewhere else, even out in space. Ingo Swann actually remote viewed Jupiter, and he was accurate.
Before NASA got there, he was one of our colleagues. In fact, his art is on the book cover of End of Suffering that Russell and I put together from our studies at Stanford Research Institute. So what does it mean? There's an overlay of consciousness on everything. In that humans are a natural cosmophysical reality. We are embedded in consciousness, capital C. And we're beginning to understand how that plays a role in the new science, the new physics. We are redefining the whole ontology of scientific reality. What is scientific truth? What is human nature? Are we multidimensional players, just waking up and realizing this fantastic latent ability? Or is this idle speculation that will simply be part of, shall we say, more of the same of the 20th century calculations.
Maybe I can talk for 1 minute because I know you want to get into it too, Dr. Theresa, but about multidimensional reality. There's actually a group in Los Angeles, I think it's called the Quantum Gravity Research Institute, and they see that even everything on this planet is from this other dimensional, we'll say the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th dimensional. We're a reflection of that. We're a concretization of what's in multi-dimensions. And that means that also everything here is part of a multi-dimensional reality. Now, superstrings, as you know, works with these little vibrating realities, and they'll say the 5th dimension is like huddled into this little nothingness. But what if the 5th dimension or the 8th dimension, or we'll go for superstrings, the 12th dimension, or 10th, 11th, 12th, depending on what theory you're looking at, actually is the bigger reality. And that ours is like the line of 2-dimensional reality, only we're 3 dimensions. I believe that that's what it's all about. That, and we ourselves, our consciousness, and this is the work we did with Elizabeth Rauscher, could function even in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th dimension, and maybe even now, right now, we're functioning at least mentally in the 5th dimension. That's how we can be, projecting our mind to another place on the planet. And I don't even like the word projecting because that's not a real term. We can be in another place on the planet right now because it's in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th dimension. We like 8th because we're in 4 dimensions right now. The 4th being time, 3rd being space.
And then we have the imaginary 4 spaces.
But we call it imaginary, but what happens if they're real? Actually, it's imaginary numbers.
What if those imaginary dimensions are more the spiritual dimensions, for example? You have your physical axes and your imaginary axes, which are maybe the realm of the metaphysical or the spiritual. And, when it comes to our multidimensionality, I think one key when it comes to helping people expand their consciousness is to just realize that they are multidimensional, just to meditate upon this idea of their multidimensionality. And that, as we start connecting into those higher dimensions or higher aspects of the self, that we are, in our mind, in our consciousness, in our spirit, if you will, we are infinite, which is why, when something is remote viewed, whether it's Jupiter or, somewhere else on the planet, we're not going anywhere. We're already there because we are infinite in our size and we are all one. And this is where if we can just tie it back in really quickly to David Bohm and the implicate order, he said, when you look at, for example, the 2 particles that are separated, and yet they're entangled. Well, if we see it from an implicate order where they're actually one thing, they're whole and they're connected, so they're not separate. And we are all one as well. So when we start to view ourselves as part of a greater, higher dimensional reality where things unite, this can bring us more and more to this realization of our oneness, of our unity. And this unity consciousness, this recognition of our integrated, that we are not separate, that we are intimately connected with everything and everyone and the whole universe. And when we can shift to that unity consciousness, that I think really gets us to that place that we want to be for creating that leap in collective consciousness. Join us again as we continue to dive deeper into this fascinating conversation with the Hurtaks on the next episode.
This conscious conversation was created, produced, and recorded by Dr. Theresa Bullard in collaboration with Drs. JJ and Desiree Hurtak, and edited by Verse Content and HH Films and Photo. The theme music was created by Tim Mountain of Even Load Productions. Quantum Minds TV is a product of the Quantum Learning Academy.